Hello and welcome to this episode of the Giant Pod. This week we are talking to Anita Collier. She is the Mayor of Frome currently at the time of this recording. I am her deputy mayor, if you didn't already know. So it's a bit of a special one really, because we get to explore that dynamic. We get to talk about our roles. She gives me a little advice for, next year if I do become the mayor. We talk about growing up in a small town. We talk about getting married and moving to London in the swinging 60s. We talk about working for ad agencies. We talk about living in posh areas of London. We talk about heartbreak. We talk about travel. We talk about being a socialite in many ways. We talk about going to Russia. We talk about immersing yourself in a country for 3 months and not knowing the language. We talk about her philosophies on trust and trusting people. We talk about so many amazing, incredible things. We talk about fair housing. We talk about fostering children, bringing children up. We talk about bringing coaches of 100 women away on holidays to go and get drunk. We talk about being the mayor in a pandemic. We talk about so many things. It was such a great chat. And I really hope you'll find this story inspiring, because I've definitely found a lot of inspiration from it. And here it is. Anita Collier, the Mayor of Frome. Enjoy. Yeah, well, I've got 54,000 tracks on there.
Jesus.
Something like that. I got over 30 days of continuous Grateful Dead alone.
Wow. I love that.
Absolutely love it.
Do you like the Grateful Dead then?
I love the Grateful Dead, Anita. I love it. So yeah, here we are.
Yeah.
It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah. We're in your office, which is very nice. I love this this jigsaw here that you've got going on.
Oh, yeah, this is MC Escher.
Right.
So Steve's a great fan of MC Escher. So we've got quite a few of his prints around the house. Yeah.
Bloody lovely. So I'm your deputy mayor. As listeners of the pod may know, I'm a deputy mayor of Frome, and you are the Mayor of Frome. So we're talking to the big boss today. Luckily I haven't had a bollocking from you yet.
Oh, I would never do that.
How do you feel? How do you feel your year has been as mayor?
Well, obviously it's been the most extraordinary year because of lockdown. I think when I actually had the chain handed over to me by the previous mayor, I had to go up and socially distance and have it passed over at arm's length. Yeah. I mean, it was all really weird, quite surreal. But of course, in those days, that was early May.
Yeah.
We thought maybe a couple of weeks and it would all be over. And I had so many plans to do things as the mayor. I was going to have parties in the park. I was going to have street parties all over the town. And I was going to attend everyone throughout the year. I was even going to have a mayor's ball. I mean, everything was going to be about social events because that's my bag. I mean, I just love social events. So I had all these wonderful plans. And then, of course, it just turned upside down. So I haven't been able to do any of that. But it's been brilliant. I wouldn't have had it any other way. And you know what's quite unreal is that I've been able to make this my own.
Yeah.
I've been able to take a totally different path from any other mayor.
Yeah.
So there's very little in the way of ribbon cutting. There's very little in the way of going to concerts. Much as it was lovely to go to these prize givings and concerts, very little of that. So I had to think of another way to make myself visible in the town. So one of the ways to do that was, particularly when businesses were struggling, was to do a walkabout. Yeah. So I set up my weekly walkabout and decided to call in on as many businesses as I could visit to say, hello, how are you doing? How are you finding things? What's the worst thing for you? How can we help? Do you know the support out there? All that sort of stuff. And it's become quite a tradition now. And I think people actually look forward to it. Yeah. It's been fun.
You've created work for me.
Have I?
So should I be handed the big chains next year, I think I'm going to get a lot of people going, you haven't come to my shop.
Well, it was nice to be able to do that, because I don't think it's been a common occurrence for most mayors, really, because there are so many other things to do.
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line. But I did have one lady who said to me, do you know, I've run a shop in Frome for 14 years. I've never seen a mayor before.
Right.
So, yeah, things like that have been lovely.
I'm going to take note of that. Yeah.
I'll send you to the shop.
I might have to do a monthly one rather than a weekly one, but it definitely feels like a good thing to do.
And by the time you get there, of course, you'll be cutting ribbons and attending concerts and prize givings like there's no tomorrow. So.
I wonder if they'd have to get extra big scissors, because, the extra big scissors for normal people are going to look like normal scissors to me.
You wouldn't be able to get your fingers through, Andy.
Yes, I'd like to do one with a chainsaw. That would be a good PR stunt, wouldn't it? Just fire up a chainsaw.
Be around the children, that's for sure.
It'd probably end up being a hedge trimmer, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would.
A hot fuzz. Well, it's a bit more like the thick of it, isn't it? I asked for a chainsaw. This is a hedge trimmer.
It would look right in your hands, though, wouldn't it? Oh, giant.
Oh, dear. So, so you're the Mayor of Frome in an independent town council, which is a great adventure, obviously, with the COVID this year. Yeah. And I think when this airs, when this is out, potentially this will be in 2021. So we're still going to be feeling the effects of COVID.
Oh, for sure.
I think
it's going to go on for a while yet.
This is just the latest adventure in the storied book of Anita Collier's life. So I wonder if you could... I just don't know where to... I guess we have to begin... It goes back to the beginning with you. Were you born here?
No. I was actually born in Exeter.
Yeah.
Born and raised in Exeter, so I went to school there. And we came to Frome in January 1964, when my father was headhunted. He was an engineer, and he was headhunted to come to work at Singer's to run the machine shop there. Right. So, in fact, he was offered 2 jobs, one in Liverpool and one in Frome. My mother was so distraught that he chose Frome because it looked nothing like the big city that we'd come from in Exeter. Right. And I often think now, if he'd taken that job in Liverpool, that would have been around the time that the Beatles were operating at the Cavern. Can you imagine?
Yes, 64.
I would have been full of that, yeah. But as it happens, I don't have a Liverpool accent now. We came to Frome, and then I took my A-levels then, because I'd technically not quite finished school. So I went to Frome Tech, as it was, in Park Road, the old Frome Tech, and took my A-levels there. I did A-level English Lit, and economic history. And I met my first husband there. We were doing our A-levels together. So I had 4 years here, took my A-levels, got a job, and of course... the job that everybody thinks you should go into if you've had a reasonable education is banking. That's where we all start, isn't it? Yeah. So I was pushed into banking. I worked at Lloyd's.
Pushed into?
Well, not pushed.
You're going.
It was very much about, this is the respectable job, and get a good pension, etc., etc. So, lucky girl. So off I went to Lloyd's Bank. And actually, I loved it. It was great. It was a farmer's bank. So we dealt with nearly all the farmers around the area. Lovely crowd of people I worked with throughout the early 60s. And then when we got married, which was in 1968, I moved to London the day I got married and spent 10 years there, having a wonderful time. I got a transfer to a job in banking at Paddington Station, and I absolutely hated it.
I was there. You loved it.
No, I was there for about 3 or 4 months, and all I did was change travellers' checks and foreign money because it was such a transient society at the station there. And I got so cheesed off with it. And my husband, who worked in Fleet Street, he was in advertising, said, leave it, come into advertising, you'll love it. And so I did. I got myself a job, which was wonderful. Told the bank manager I was leaving, and he really gave me the 3rd degree.
Really?
Wagged his fingers. Oh, my dear girl, you're moving into a corrupt society. There'll be no pension, nothing solid in advertising, my girl.
Right.
That sort of chat. So anyway, I left, and I had my interview with one of London's oldest newspapers, which was the Illustrated London News. Right. And I shall never forget the interview because I was interviewed by a guy called Paul Buck, who was the advertising director at the time. And he called me in and said, what's your name? So I said, it's Anita Collier. Anita May, as I was then. And he said, and where do you live? And I said, I live in Dolphin Square, which, of course, was quite an elite place to live in.
Oh, really?
I live in Dolphin Square. Oh, can you start on Monday?
You just need to name drop your road.
Absolutely.
These are my ends.
Yes. So I kicked off in advertising, and I worked in magazines, ending up really working for IPC magazines, which is the big Woman's Weekly, all of that lot, for 10 years. Had an absolute dream all the way through. Brilliant. Wildlife.
So run me through what was your day-to-day life be in the so you're in advertising.
Yeah.
In London.
Yeah.
You're living in, what was it, Dolphin Square?
Dolphin Square. Yeah.
What's so special about Dolphin Square? How did you end up there? Is it because you were earning the big bucks?
No,
or was it an up and
because
coming
actually
place?
it was very cheap.
Right.
This is the weird thing. It was almost like a housing association thing. It was the biggest block of flats in Europe post-war initially.
Really?
And a lot of the ministers from Parliament had their little pied-à-terres in Dolphin Square.
What does this mean?
This little hideaway for
rendezvous.
somewhere to hide their mistress, really. Princess Anne was reported to have had a flat there. So it was quite a smart place to live, but you couldn't buy a flat there. You had to come in through the back door by interview.
Okay.
And you could only get a flat if you went to the right school and you had the right background.
Really?
And luckily, my husband went to a school that they accepted, and so we got in. But once you were in, I mean, it was a pittance. It was very, very cheap. But a cracking place to live, not far from Parliament Square. So it was all very easy. I taxied everywhere at night for my social life because it was so close. But an average day for me, I guess, would be going into work at 9:30, which is the time we started. You'd be making a few phone calls, etc., doing a bit of research, reading up on who your clients were, because I had huge budgets I had to find. And come about 11 o'clock, you'd start to think about lunch, because you'd probably be meeting somebody for a meeting before lunch. Yeah. So you say, well, we'll meet at 11:30 and have a chat about business, and then we can relax over a nice lunch. And lunch in those days was 3 hours.
Oh, really?
It really was 3. And believe it or not, it was expected of you that you'd have 3 lunches at least every week in your diary.
Right.
And if you didn't, your manager would not want to know why. It meant you weren't doing your job properly. If you weren't whining and dining all these guys from the advertising agencies and what have you.
Oh, this is so you.
Oh, it was wonderful. I loved it. Can you imagine? Oh. And I mean, I can tell you some stories about that. I remember once going for an interview with a guy to work for a magazine, and he said, look, can we meet for lunch and we'll talk about your interview. So I gaily went along to a wine bar. We had a couple of bottles of wine, a bit of bread and cheese, as you do. And he said, well, this is very interesting, but I think we should continue this. I know a little afternoon drinking club. Would you like to come along? So I said, oh, of course. Absolutely. I remember getting up the next morning. I have no idea what time I arrived home. And I remember thinking, oh, my God, I don't know if I got the job. I don't know, what am I going to do? So I rang the guy and I said, it was a chap called David Thomas. And I said, David, I'm highly embarrassed and I'm so sorry. I know I met you yesterday for an interview and I'm ashamed to say, I had a lovely time, but I'm ashamed to say I can't remember if you offered me the job. And he said, thank God you've rung, because I can't remember either, but the job's yours.
That's amazing.
So they were great times. Honestly, they were great times. And one of the girls I worked with in one office, absolute alcoholic, and this was quite common then. And about 10 o'clock, she'd come in with terrible shakes like this. Right. And about 10 o'clock, she'd give me the wink, and I'd have to say to somebody in the house, just go to the photocopier. And I'd wait outside, and she'd come out. Yeah. And we'd both go to the pub, which was literally next door. And I had to order her a large gin and tonic and feed it to her because she couldn't hold the glass. And once it was gone, then we'd both fire back in about 10, 15 minutes later. And she was steady as a rock. Right. Could do the rest of the day, no problem. So yeah.
You're an enabler.
Par for the course, yeah. Cracking times.
Yeah. So what year is this, you say, 68?
Yeah, sort of 68 into early 70s, really.
So
And
you're in London in the swinging 60s?
oh, yeah, it was absolutely in the thick of it. It was Carnaby Street. It was, King's Road. It was all about hot pants and Mary coats and white boots and, all of it, really. Brilliant stuff.
All that lovely stuff. I was gonna ask you, what, because I'm not sure if tribalism was really necessary in terms of culture, really existed back then necessarily. I guess in the 50s you had your Teddy Boys and your rockers, and I guess the mods were a thing in the 60s, and the hippies are in at that point, I guess.
Yeah.
Where were you in that cultural zeitgeist? What was your tribe?
It was all about the flower power.
Right.
It was long cheesecloth wraparound skirts. It was swinging tops. But you'd go from that into very short minis. It was a sort of weird transition that you could go from super short to super long, but great wedged platform heels to wear.
Yeah.
And it was just very free and easy. It was all about anything goes, man.
Yeah.
It's peace in our time and all of that stuff.
Man.
It was just so easy.
It's if I went to your flat, right, in Dolphin Square, and I had a little route around your record collection in 1968, what am I finding in there?
Oh, well, actually, it's interesting because it was things like, I guess, Carly Simon, Elton John, Phil Collins. It was...
Phil Collins in 68.
Yeah. Was it?
Who knows? You can't even remember getting a job. Maybe that was the wrong question to ask. I don't know. How much of this period do you remember?
Well, they always say if you can remember the 60s, you weren't there. Yeah, but no, certainly I remember a lot of Linda Lewis and people like that. Quite sort of funky voices, really. A lot of people who were different. Even the Carpenters, which is not really my bag at all. But that's some of the stuff I used to listen to then.
She did used to sing and drum.
Yeah.
Which earns a lot of points.
I guess
in my book.
I was just going to say that would be up your street then.
Yeah, actually, I've been meaning to pick up a Carpenters compilation and just see what's going on there. Okay, so who were you sort of bumping into in your sort of block of flats that you were possibly notable?
Oh God, you wouldn't bump into anybody. It was all very private. I mean, you'd walk into because they had several houses that were all named after admirals.
Right.
So I spent a time in Collingwood House, and then we moved and went to Grenville House. So they were all admirals. But each of these houses had their own porter, who knew you very well, and you got to know him very well. Other than that, you didn't see a soul. You didn't notice anybody. Nobody ever came out of their houses and mixed or anything like that.
I guess that's by design.
Yeah, absolutely. It was all very, very behind closed doors. It was that type of atmosphere there in the place. Wonderful community gardens in the centre of the whole commune, if you like. And that was lovely in the summer because you'd see people out there on the grass with their little blankets, and the butler would bring them tea in china cups on a tray in the afternoon. So, yeah.
Living the life. So what was the... so obviously it sounds like you were having quite a social life within your job. What was the social life like of the 60s in London? You're a young professional.
Yeah.
You're living in a good area. The world's your oyster. Your parents are back in Frome, which is, for anyone listening who doesn't know Frome or the area, it's about 2 hours. Well, it might have even been a 4-hour drive back then.
It was certainly a long time because there was no motorway then. Yeah. No M4 then.
So you really were really away.
Yeah, it was a really 2 or 3 hour drive to get back home.
Right.
But the social life was fantastic, and it was all really built around the local. I mean, my local pub was a pub called the Australian, not far off Sloane Square. And it was just a cracking pub where we would all meet. And it was very easy to get engaged in conversation. Most nights you'd stay there until 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
You'd go on for a curry or something like that, or go to a little bistro.
Yeah.
So you get home about 1 o'clock, and that was just every night. But there was we were laughing all the time, but I guess that might be to do with the fact that you're in your 20s. Everybody laughs in their 20s, don't they? So it was just about making fun. We did everything we could just to enjoy ourselves. So we might have the odd wacky fancy dress party, anything to be different. And I do remember on one occasion, Jeff and I, that was my husband then, after a couple of years, had decided we were going to go on holiday. And I found this idyllic little place on an island called Ios in the Greek islands. Never heard of it, didn't know anything about it. But we decided to book it, which we did, through a company called SunMed, which was very, very new in those days. And when we were talking about it in the pub, another couple said, God, that sounds bloody lovely. Do you mind? Can we join you? I said, no, not at all. It'd be lovely to have your company. It'd be great.
It's the 60s, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, come along.
4 of us. That was lovely. Within a couple of weeks, we got a lot more. And eventually I took 36 people from the pub to that holiday. And it was absurd. It was just wonderful. We had the greatest time. Absolutely brilliant.
Wow, 36 people.
36 people, yeah.
That really is a local, isn't it?
Yeah, it was.
What did that pub look like while you were away?
Pretty empty.
Probably had a week off.
Yeah.
So you do this advertising thing for what was that, like 10? Do you say 10 years?
About 10 years, yeah.
And then what? Then what was the impetus for you to move on from that? Because it sounds like a cool job.
It was fantastic. But, you've got to remember I was coming to the end of my 20s by then. Also, the biggest trigger for me was that my husband and I separated.
Right.
And actually, because we were both in the advertising industry, which is very unusual, everybody knew us. It's quite a small community, really, advertising. Right. Everybody knew us both. And my boss said to me, look, this is going to be very difficult for you. Yeah. Because he'd left me. So they said, this is going to be very difficult for you going around to everybody. What we've decided, we've had a chat, and we'd like to send you on a 3-month sabbatical, fully paid, so that you can go off and contemplate your navel and come back when you're ready.
Oh,
how cool was that?
Jesus.
Yeah.
You must have been very good at what you did.
I loved it. I certainly loved it, yeah.
This sounds like just a different era.
It was.
It was, obviously.
Yes, you wouldn't have that now. It's all about commercialism and fast pace and everything now. It's very different. But I went off, I decided to put a pin in the map, literally. And I found this tiny island called Pantelleria.
Yeah.
Didn't know whether it belonged to North Africa or Italy, because it was midway in the middle of the ocean. Didn't know how to get there, but I went.
How did you get there?
Actually, I had to fly to Palermo in Sicily, and then get a train down to the bottom, and then catch a ferry over to Pantelleria. It was an overnight ferry that took 6 hours. And by the time I arrived, there were about 10 or 12 Vespers there waiting to take me off to say, come with me, come with me. Because they were all desperate. They'd never seen anybody on the island before, or an English person. And they wanted to give me hospitality, because the Italians are so beautifully hospitable. I mean, just lovely, lovely people. So anyway, I found a little place living with a seamstress and her daughter. And I was there for about 3 months. Didn't have any Italian at all. I knew how to say ciao and spaghetti. That was all. That'll get me by. And I went off with my dictionary and a smile and a bit of sign language. And I got by.
That's amazing.
Brilliant. But, they knew nothing because it was so unusual to have a tourist on the island. I was carrying traveller's checks in those days, which is, of course, the way you travelled. Right. And I went to the guy to say, the guy who owned the bar seemed to be like he was the patriarch, really, of the whole town. Right. And I said to him, where do I go? Where's the bank? He said, we don't have a bank. What do you want? I said, well, I've got traveller's checks. Oh, you leave that with me. Oh. But then he had to phone Sicily to find out what to do with them because they'd never had them before.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So is this what year is this at this point that you're doing this?
Oh, this was 60. This was 78.
77.
Yeah.
77.
Yeah.
So at 77, you're a woman on your own in a foreign land. There's no internet. There's no mobile phones.
No.
Did you? And society was a lot. I can't speak for Italian society at that point in time, but society was a very different place in terms of its attitudes to women, wasn't it? In that point. So, did you ever feel nervous travelling on your own? Did you ever feel unsafe? Or
Never
it's quite
did.
the adventure, isn't
Yeah,
it? Really,
never did. My mother was far more nervous for me than I was.
Right.
She used to be terrified and say, "Oh, don't trust anybody. Be careful of this and watch that and don't do." No, my feeling was, I think the world's a lovely place. I think genuinely most people are lovely human beings.
Yeah.
And my feeling was then and still is, if you trust people, you get payback.
Yeah.
It works. And I must admit, I was given some wonderful hospitality. Wherever, I've been around the world and everywhere I've been, I've done a lot of travelling on my own. I've never, ever, well, only once been in a situation where I could have got into trouble.
We were going to get onto that. So you're living with this seamstress. You don't speak the language much. How do you communicate? How do you get by in that situation?
Literally by using sign language and the dictionary, and trying somehow to use your hands to get something across. You're either wanting to eat or wanting a drink, or if you want to catch a train, you make a noise like a train. So then you start to ask.
Choo choo.
I'm not sure if it is choo choo in Italian, mind you.
That's amazing. So when you left there, did you feel that you'd sort of found yourself in a way? Do you feel that you'd got over your? Was it heartbreak?
Yeah, I was pretty devastated,
Right.
I must say. Yeah.
And there's nothing worse.
Came as a shock. It was a huge shock.
Right.
Came out of the blue. So, yeah, it took me a while. But yes, I did. I came back. Of course, I lost a lot of weight because I was eating very well, typical Mediterranean diet.
So what was that? Fish and vegetables?
Just one dish of pasta a day.
Right.
Or fresh fish and salad, one dish per day. So, I was losing weight hand over fist. I got a fantastic suntan.
Yeah.
And I came back feeling like the bee's knees. This is great.
That is what we call a glow up.
Is it?
Yes, where you sort of you get more. I guess you get more attractive, or you find your you peak. Do you know what I mean? And you sort of feel yourself a bit, and everyone sort of notices you a bit more.
Absolutely.
So when you came back, were you like, he's gonna hate this? Do you know what I mean? Like, was there a little bit of sort of like, you're gonna know what you missed out on? What was his name?
Jeff.
You're gonna know what you missed out on here.
I have to secretly admit that didn't go through.
He didn't drop his mug or something in the office when he walked in. That's brilliant. Yeah. So then you came back to work and you reintegrated into your job. How long before you jumped ship then?
Oh, I'm ashamed to say not very long. They gave me that sabbatical.
Yeah.
In the hope that they would keep me when I came back. And I was very naughty because it was only about 6 months later I had the opportunity to emigrate with a friend.
Right.
To Australia. Really, really, really good friend. And we went travelling, decided to go off to do this thing.
Yeah.
But we spent time... we flew into New York, we went to Canada, we went down to Miami, we went to Mexico, we went to Los Angeles, we went to San Francisco, all over the shop on the way to this trip.
Yeah.
But when we got to San Francisco, I'm ashamed to say really, and I still feel uncomfortable about it a bit, but I bottled it then and I didn't go. I didn't go on to Australia.
Right.
The difference was she had a job to go to. She had contacts over there. I didn't. I mean, I'd left on the spur of the moment, just...
Right. Off of your newfound
absolutely,
confidence from your sabbatical, I guess.
Yes.
You went, I can
do anything.
A woman of the world now.
But suddenly it dawned on me after all this travelling that I didn't have a job to go to. I had no money.
Running out.
I had nowhere to live. So it was nonsense. And also I felt I hadn't really... I felt actually in a way I was still running away from the breakup.
Grief, right.
And I just felt I ought to go back and...
face it.
Yeah, just really sort of stand up to it.
That's interesting. Have you always been... Are you quite an introspective person? Do you do a lot of sort of checking in with yourself?
Yeah.
Monitoring, thinking about how you actually feel about a situation? Mm-hmm. Do you realise that... Do you ever think back to something and you go, actually, I thought I was having lots of fun then, but really I was dealing with something?
Yeah, I certainly did in that instance. I have to say now, at this stage of my life, I look back thinking, yes, by God, I've had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But I don't doubt it now. I have had a lot of fun.
You can't deny it.
I have been so blessed with my life. Really, it's been fantastic. It's been a roller coaster of fun. I remember being in a meeting when I worked at Virgin for about 10 years, and I remember being in a management meeting, and there were about 12 of us around the table. And the boss said one Monday morning, he said, right, we'll start slightly differently today. He said, I just want you all, I'm going to give you 5 minutes, I want you all to think of a title of whatever you would like to be. Anything, you know, the oyster is, world's your oyster. And I remember thinking about it, and I thought, what would I really like the world to know me as? What would I choose as my title? And I decided, and I've held to it, I think, since, I want to be a facilitator of fun.
Right.
I just think that is the most wonderful position to be in. And when I look back, I realise I've probably instigated a lot of that throughout my life, one way or another. Yeah.
That's amazing. And so you bottle it. You don't go to Australia.
Mm-hmm.
How does your friend take that? Is she like
very, very upset? We still talk about it now.
Really?
Yeah, I think she felt very betrayed at the time.
Okay.
And I get that, and I feel, I feel really bad still.
Still, you hold
Still
regret.
I don't regret the fact that I didn't go because my life turned out to be so wonderful here.
Yeah.
I regret that she went through those feelings and had to travel on her own to something she thought she was going into with a mate.
A companion, right?
Yeah.
I see.
But yeah.
So how does... So you say to her, there's an awkward conversation. I'm not going on now to this next phase with you. And I guess you probably had these feelings brewing for a little while until you got to the point where you went, I have to tell this person now.
Yeah.
So you tell her. How do you break something like that to someone?
I can't remember the conversation. You just have to talk about the fact. Look, I've been sitting and thinking a lot about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And I'm starting to come to some conclusions that aren't going to sit well with either of us. I don't even know that it's the right decision for me or for you. I'm still in turmoil about it. It's a massive dilemma. But I just feel for my own sanity, where I am now, I have to go back.
Right. And so obviously they're going to have some very raw, visceral, almost like knee-jerky reactions, I guess, at that moment. And then I would assume that some weeks or months pass and they go, I tell you what, I kind of see it from your point of view now.
Oh,
or did they never do that?
Yeah, no. She is still my closest friend.
Right.
Still. We've been friends for, all that time. So I'm talking 40 years.
Yeah.
And she'll say now, it was definitely the best decision you could have taken.
Right.
So I know I have her support in that, without doubt.
Yeah.
But she'll still say, but you left me alone when I needed it.
That's interesting. And so what year is this again? 77?
77.
And so she goes off to Australia, down under, a very, very long way away.
Yeah.
How do you guys maintain pre-internet?
Yeah.
Maintain a relationship, a friendship that's clearly very deep, very loving.
Yeah.
Over such a distance.
It was all letter writing.
Right.
All letter writing and postcards. That's what seems funny now talking about postcards, but that's what we had. It was just backwards and forwards, and you'd have these lovely thin airmail letters that would come through the post, and there'd be reams of them. And of course, in those days, you only had the one letter that would fold up, so you'd be writing in the margins and down the sides, trying to say what you wanted to say. But yeah, so we communicated regularly. Always have done.
Right.
Yeah.
That's fascinating that's something that's been maintained, because it's a lot of effort, isn't it? It's a lot of effort to essentially have a pen pal. Yeah. For all those years.
But we'd done so much together. We were so close. Right. She really helped me through my divorce period and everything. Yeah. So you do bond at emotional times like that, particular thing. So yeah.
And so, did you go and visit her? And she come visit you?
She came over quite a lot. Yeah. She used to come home probably about every 18 months or so, and always came and stayed here.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of that. But of course, by the time I had moved on, I mean, it was only a year, 18 months later, that I had moved back to Frome.
Right.
And met my second husband. And we weren't earning big money then.
Right.
I was living in Frome. I was well away from the London high life of high earning.
Yeah.
And we had the kids, and so money was a real struggle. We couldn't afford to take a holiday to Australia. That was like something far out in space for us.
Right, yeah.
So
it's still a big...
it's huge.
It's still a big holiday.
It's a lot of money. It's a huge amount of money. And it was way beyond our pocket in those days. But we finally took the trip in 99. In 1999. So over 20 years later, I arrived with John and the kids on Australian soil, and I broke my heart.
Because you loved it?
It was so emotional, because I thought I was supposed to be here 20 years ago. It's taken me this long to get here. It was such an emotional moment. I remember the plane landing, and I had tears streaming down my face when we arrived. It was just amazing. Wow. So, and I've been over 3 or 4 times since, obviously. Loved the place.
So you had an emotional connection immediately with Australia.
Yeah.
And is this because you were like, this is where my best friend lives?
Yes, yeah, and because I felt I got to know it through her.
Yeah.
And John had family in Adelaide. I've also got friends that I worked with who had moved to Australia. So I had a lot of people I knew out there and heard all their stories. Somewhere I'd always wanted to go, and I finally got there.
That is such a powerful story. I've always wanted to go to Australia. I used to watch a lot of the Steve Irwin stuff.
Oh, right,
He was great.
Yeah.
He really appeals to... a lot of people, but especially hyperactive young boys.
He was fine. My boys loved him. We used to sit and watch it together. Yeah, brilliant guy.
Just great.
Yeah.
I've always had a strange affinity with Australia, but I've never been. But I've always liked programs. You know those like programs where they go and they buy a house there and they have to decide whether they're going to move
whether they're going to
or
stay
not.
or move. Yeah.
You know, I always used to watch those shows and just think this place just looks like a place I would just love.
It is. It's a dream place, and I've never been to a more user-friendly city than Sydney. And the thing I love about it is it's got everything that I want out of a place to live. In that it's a very vibrant city, very youthful, very creative, and it's on the water. Everywhere is on the water. So you go to a cafe or a bar, and you can just sit out on your chair and just watch the boats come in and out, and it is idyllic.
Is it a lifestyle? It's a different lifestyle, isn't it?
Totally different lifestyle, yeah. And it's the sunshine, isn't it? That's what makes a big difference. But, you eat on the beach, you take your coffee onto the beach, you walk on the beach. It's daily routine to hear the ocean.
Right. And that's an interesting thing as well, because you probably have a much bigger connection to nature. It's probably far more humbling on a daily basis that you're always confronted by something vast and powerful and unforgiving, but also so incredibly beautiful. It probably says a lot about the lifestyle and how they seem to, at least from what I can see with Australia, have a way more carefree, fun, orientated existence.
Yeah, I think they do. It's all about, invitations to parties. It's all about open house. It's about opening up your garden, meeting people in bars on the water, eating outside on pavements. Lovely life. But bear in mind, of course, that with Australia, it's not all... it's not all about the sunshine and the culture and things like that, because a lot of Australians, I think the one thing they find really difficult, particularly the younger ones coming up, is that it's so far away from everywhere. So it's very expensive to travel.
Right.
And a lot of people coming up, when they finish their education maybe, the idea of staying in Australia... I think for a lot of people feels quite limiting, because they've never really seen the world, because the rest of the world is so blooming far away.
And did you make any trips to New Zealand?
No, it's one of the few places I haven't been. I've done Fiji, but I haven't done New Zealand. But I've done a lot of travel in my life, actually, through America, Africa, Asia, Yeah.
This is a dream. This is such a dreamy thing. I always wanted to have a job that allowed me to travel, and I've talked about the band on the podcast a lot before, and the travel opportunities that's presented, and it's just been, those are the greatest times of my life, and it really does expand your mind. Doesn't
hugely. And meeting people of different cultures. And the thing I love, people say, well, why don't you want to stay in the UK? You've got go to Cornwall on a nice day.
Get out there.
It's lovely. But I loved, and of course for me, a lot of the fun of travel went when everybody was on the euro. Because I used to love dealing with the drachma and the franc and the mark, all those sort of different currencies.
Right.
When it became the euro, it got a bit boring.
Right.
But being
your money sucks.
Being introduced to different foods, different drinks, different cafe styles, everything. I mean, it was just fascinating for me. I mean, going to Bulgaria when it was still a communist country.
Right.
It was mind-boggling because women were sweeping the streets and collecting the dust carts. You'd go into every restaurant that sold identical food at identical prices, and the only way you'd know you were in a different restaurant was because in one there would be a 4-piece quartet playing as you walked in. In another one there might be a little bit of piped music. In another one the chap would greet you with a bow tie. But that was the only way you knew the difference. The menus were state controlled. All the locals couldn't buy local goods. There was a huge black market for money in those days. I mean, I'm going way back to about early 80s. And I remember going across and somebody said, look, if you use the black market, you'll get 3 times the value for your money.
Right.
And they said, the lifeguards are really good at doing that. So just go and talk to the lifeguard. Right. So, and of course, they sit up on great high chairs. And I remember going to see a lifeguard and I sat down and I said, I understand you change money. Shh. He said, be quiet, be quiet. So I said, well, what should I do? He said, dig a hole in the sand next to my chair and put your money in it. How much do you want to change? So I think it was about £20 or something. So and he said, no, walk away. I said, well, how do I know? How do I get the money? He said, don't worry, I'll come and find you. So I had to take all this on trust. And sure enough, we got about 3 times the value of the open market. Right. And on another day, I went down there and said, look, I come for some money. He said, go down to the sea with your camera, pretend to drop your camera, and when you pick it up, put the money in the sand. It was all very furtive. That's hilarious. He would change it on condition that I went to the shop for him to buy toothpaste and soap and deodorant, which is things that they didn't have access to.
Oh, I see.
So that was the trade. That was the deal. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So when you think back to when travelling was like that, it's very different from the way it is today.
Right.
Of course, Bulgaria is one of the great places to go now.
That's that is quite incredible. What brought you to Bulgaria?
It was a cheap and cheerful family holiday in those days. We had little money.
Darling, you must go. I've heard the black market is exquisite.
It was absolutely great. And I've been back to Bulgaria twice since. I've been for a summer holiday and skiing in Bulgaria. And
Did you go back for the lifeguard? Did you go and say, one of my friends on the beach?
Oh, I'm not sure they do that now, bless them.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So you've come back from let's get on to I'm trying to figure out where we were in your timeline before we went off there. Tell me about Virgin, when you were working for Virgin, because you've told me a little bit about sort of brief hangouts with Richard Branson and things like that. So was that the next?
Well, I wouldn't call it a hangout. But
this is why I'm asking. Was this the next professional trip after you've come back from London?
Not really, no, because I came back, as I said, I actually came back because when I was still living in London, I'd just come back from San Francisco. I got bronchitis,
right,
and I was feeling really rough. It was about 2 weeks before Christmas, and I rang my mum just to say Happy Christmas, and she said, God, you sound dreadful. And I said, yeah, I'm feeling a bit rough. She said, well, why don't you come home, just recharge your batteries, and then you can go back after Christmas. Yeah. So I came home. I got myself a little job working in the Portway at night over the bar, in a penny bar in those days.
Oh, yeah.
And I met John, my second husband. So I never did go back to London.
Ah.
So
he was worth staying for.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, love at first sight and all that. So we we were together for a couple of years. We got married. We had the children. But I spent 5 years, actually, before we had the kids, working at a company in Bath called Land Travel, which was a tour operator.
Right.
And they used to run coaches to Europe for social organisers. So you'd leave on a Friday night and you'd come back on a Monday morning.
Right.
But it was, oh God, it was a shambles. They used to grab couriers off the streets and say to a young chap, grab somebody back, do you want to earn yourself 20 quid this weekend? Oh, yes, please.
Yeah.
Well, come and be on this coach, and if anything goes wrong, give us a ring and we'll get it sorted. It was all very amateurish. Yeah. But I worked there for 5 years, took on a team of couriers and trained them up, put them in uniform and got them properly trained and all that sort of thing. And loved it, loved the job. And used to go off to Europe 13 weeks on the trot every winter doing presentations. We'd take coach loads of these people away, tell them what it was all about and show them and say, right, now go back and fill the coaches with your own clubs. So I had a lovely job doing that. Then I left to have the children. And I hate not working. So even though I didn't have a full-time job, I had, I think at one stage, 8 part-time jobs doing different things. So that was fun.
Can you remember these 8? What were you doing?
Yeah. I ran my own China business, selling China and pottery. I worked at weekends on the open-top buses in Bath as a tour guide. I was selling knockoff perfume. I actually was collecting the football pool's money, believe it or not, once a week. There were just lots of different jobs I was doing. And I ran my own catering business. And I was looking after a little girl, like a foster mother, which I did for 5 years. So, lots and lots of different things going on.
You're prolific.
Kept me busy.
Tell me about fostering. What's that?
Well,
what sort of roller coaster is that?
It wasn't fostering as such. It was just a very sad story, really. It was a neighbour of mine whose wife died within weeks of giving birth to a little girl. And he tragically went off to live with her sister in Manchester for the first 6 months, trying to get over the grief of it all, because there he was, left alone with a little baby to manage. But he decided to come home after 6 months and needed someone to look after this little girl. And we've got a lot of lovely neighbours around here, and lots of people stood up and said, I'll have her for a day or two, or, I can take her. I always felt she needed something more than that. It was like she needed a surrogate mother almost. Consistency in her life.
Consistency is key.
Rather than just, it's Mary on Monday and Haggis on Tuesday.
Getting passed around.
Absolutely.
Even though this is they're lovely people, yes, I'm sure.
Yes.
I know what you're saying.
That didn't feel right. So, and the other thing, sometimes you think, oh, this is fate. This is meant to be, because we've got 2 boys. And if we'd had a little girl, we were going to call her Joanna Louise.
Right.
And this little girl was called Joanna Louise.
Oh, my God.
And I remember saying to her dad, I would dearly love to look after her. I've got my own boys now. I think they were 5 and 3 or 4 and 2 at the time. So I'm perfectly placed now. I'm at home all the time. But I want to take it on really as a business, because this isn't a favour from a neighbour. Yeah. If it's done as a business, you'll feel able to come to me and dictate what I need to do or what I'm doing wrong. So we're on a footing that you feel very comfortable with. And also it means that I would only do it as long as I take her on until she starts school, because I think she needs that stability for the first 4 or 5 years of her life. Right. And that's what I did. And he got married again. Which was absolutely wonderful. And they moved to somewhere a few miles away. And it was just about the time when she was about 5 years old. So it was perfect timing. Yeah. Really hard to let her go, mind you.
Oh, Was that emotional? Did he have to sort of break that to you? To sort of gently?
Well, I knew it was coming. Right. I knew it was coming, But it was very hard, because she'd been she'd been on holiday with us. And
part of the family.
I still think so fondly of her now, but she's got her own children now. She's got twins now, so lovely,
So do you see her often now?
No, I talk to her, but no, I don't see her very often these days, because, again, she's not living in Frome anymore. So,
right. Yeah. So where did they move to? Where did they go?
I think they've gone to not Farnborough, I think it is, or
Right.
somewhere like that. Yeah.
It's incredible. We're not even halfway through, are we? We're not even halfway through this timeline. I just can't believe that name coincidence.
Yeah.
And you know, when you
Bizarre,
said about fate and things like that, do you ever feel like do you feel like you have an inner compass?
oh gosh, yes.
Yeah, I've always felt
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that,
yeah.
and I haven't really felt it necessarily for a little while, but definitely when I was younger, teenagers into sort of early 20s, I always knew what my next move had to be, even if it was a little bit scary. But
Yep.
but it's an instinct,
You
isn't
know
it?
it's coming.
And you don't know where it comes from,
Yeah.
but you just know you have to go there, and it's super powerful. And I sort of miss it in a way. I guess it will come back.
It will come.
Yeah, it will
When
come
you're
back.
ready to make a move, you'll know.
Yeah.
I always did, and I always knew it about 6 months before it was due to happen.
Really?
Yeah, it used to take about that long
Right.
to
you sit on
manifest
it.
itself.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, something's going to happen here. I don't know. I didn't even know what it was. I had no idea
Right.
which turn it would be. But yeah, always felt it. And it's interesting because, you talk about fate. Steve and I were talking about this because we've been together for 2 years now. And we were basically, people who've been on our own for quite a few years, really floundering around in the ocean like two big ships, not living life, loving it. No, everything was fine, but we bumped into each other at just the right time, at the perfect moment, and it's just the most brilliant fit. So it's
you guys
fate,
definitely you definitely got the chemistry.
Oh yeah,
and there's such a relaxed vibe around you two. It's really quite beautiful, really. It's really nice.
Yeah.
How did you meet Steve?
On a dating website.
You get out there, don't you? You don't leave. You just go for things, don't you? There's no stopping you.
And it was odd because I was due to go off on holiday. I got a holiday booked to Greece because I used to take about 10, 12 holidays a year. And this particular occasion, I was booked to go for 2 weeks to Crete. And Steve and I think we texted once and had a phone conversation.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'm off on holiday. I don't know whether it's worth meeting beforehand or, maybe we should leave it, come back. And we chatted about something or other and said, well, there's only one possible time, and that could be the Sunday, the day before I go, really. Yeah. I've just got that one day. Yeah. If you fancy, we'll do it. So we met for Sunday lunch.
Yeah.
We just didn't stop talking. It took off.
Right.
We had an amazing lunch, shared a bottle of wine, went out in the garden afterwards with coffee and brandy, and just didn't stop talking.
Right.
And I remember going off to Greece thinking, oh my God, I can't.
I'm not going.
I need to come back early.
Yeah.
But we talked every day while I was away.
Yeah.
It just felt so natural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You do know it, don't you? When you're in the midst of a relationship that has that little something to it, you think, why do I care a bit more than normal?
Absolutely.
And the conversation just goes and goes and goes.
Yeah.
And then you turn around and you go, wow, I've been talking to you for like 3 months every day and I'm not bored.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great.
Very special.
It's lovely.
Very special.
Yeah.
And it's not, the thing that I liked about Steve was I remember in our conversation, the first conversation we had on the phone, he said, well, what is it you're really looking for? And I said, well, to be perfectly honest, I've been with a couple of guys where, I feel as though they say what they think I want to hear.
Right.
I want somebody to shoot from the hip, to tell me how it is. And if I need putting straight, I want someone to put me straight. He said, no problem with that, girl. I'm from Yorkshire. You'll get that from me. So I remember thinking, yeah, that's my man.
That's great. Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, I got a lot of love for Steve. Got a lot of time for him. So where were we? So you've gone. Where were we? Where were we to? This is such a phenomenal life story. You've fostered, and she's flown the nest, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
I guess that's where we're at then, isn't it? What then? So you've got one down.
Yeah. Well, I went back to work. Decided when my kids were about 9, but they were okay then. I could go back to work. I'd done the bit of giving them that sort of solid start. And I took a job working for a company that's now the KFC building up near Sainsbury's. And in those days, it was called Enterprise House.
Right.
And it was run by a company called Amway, International Business Systems, which is an American offshoot of Amway. And to all intents and purposes, pyramid selling, although they would never use that word because it was outlawed. Right. But it was very much about, I'm going to sell goods and then, I'll take a piece of your commission and then a piece of your commission. It's a big pyramid selling thing. 5 years I did that.
Yeah. It's interesting that it seems to be that your jobs last roughly 5 years at a time.
Yeah.
Is that the arc of your? I'm not suggesting you have commitment issues.
It is if I'm.
but what I'm saying is this seems to be the natural.
My attention span. I think probably
cycle for you.
I start to need a different challenge after that, and then I got made redundant from that job because the company was just shrinking. Because those companies only ever do well when the economy is struggling because people are looking to
boost their incomes.
Yeah, but it was changing, so people were being made redundant, and so I heard that Virgin were coming to Trowbridge to set up a head office to start up a company called Virgin Mobile, and I remember thinking, I want to do that. That's me. It sounds like exactly the sort of place I want to work.
Yeah.
So I went for an interview, and they said, "No, I'm sorry, you're overqualified. We can't take you."
Yeah.
I said, "No, come on. I really want this, and I know I can do it."
Right.
It was only going to be on the phones to start with because I was quite happy to go in at that level, thinking with everybody they were taking on 200 people, I think, and I thought, just go in, and when the time is right, put your head above the parapet, and you can move from there.
Yeah.
But they said, no, you're far too overqualified and we'll spend all this money to train you up and then you'll push off.
Yeah.
And I said, no, really, I'm desperate to do this. Sorry, I was given the boot, sent out. And I remember going out into the car park, turning around and looking at that building, thinking, this isn't right.
Right.
I'm meant to work here. I know I'm meant to work here.
So your compass kicked in again.
Yeah. So I went through a different route. Right. I went back to an agency.
Yeah.
And say, can you get me an interview? And they said, yeah, okay. They set it up for me. And I saw a different woman who interviewed me and they took me on.
Right, interesting.
So I got in.
Maybe she just, you were a threat.
I don't know. But I knew I was meant to work there. So it was inevitable. I had to try again and make sure I did.
And so you did put your head above the parapet, I'm assuming, after...
Yeah, I started on the phones, and within 6 weeks, I was made customer centre coordinator.
Right.
And actually, it meant that I wore about 25 different hats, I think, because I did everything. I remember coming home and poring over blueprints at night to do all the logistics about moving desks around. And if you had any idea with a call centre, how many people because we were 1,500 people in the end. When you've got when you're expanding to get to that number, you've got to keep moving into different parts of the building and spreading out. And each time you do that, you have to move everybody's desk and their computer and look at their floor ports and look at their telephone. So I was struggling with all this, seeing which department should work with which. So logistics was one part. I was the face of Virgin. So if we had any visitors, I would take them around the building and show them everything. And this is who we are and what we do. I put in for submitting all the awards that we wanted to go for. I would do all the entries for all the big awards for the top 10 companies, things like that. I managed all the escalated complaints. So any complaint that came in to a director in writing, I would end up responding to. And I loved that job. Absolutely love it. I love dealing with knotty problems and getting them sorted. So that was one of the things I loved. And I also ran, probably the biggest thing I did there was I ran a huge reward and recognition scheme that gave back to staff. Oh, and I was in charge of the charity budget, which was 1% of the net profit the company made, which is £1 million.
Right.
So I went off to South Africa and worked with the charities and all sorts of things. So
So
yeah,
tell me about
lovely
South
job.
Africa. Well, it must have been quite an experience. So you were doing
Yeah.
charity work?
Well, no,
Or-
I didn't do charity work. We were working with a lot of charities over there.
Right.
And Richard was very keen to work with a lot of people in South Africa. He was very keen to try and get rid of AIDS and HIV and those sorts of things. So he had fingers in a few pies over there.
Yeah.
There was a wonderful Dutch doctor, and I'm going to lose this, Hugo Tempelman, I think he was called, who discovered all sorts of new tips and what have you for pulling people back from the brink of dying.
Right.
With HIV and AIDS and what have you. Amazing man.
Right.
And Richard wanted to work with him because he was impressed by all his work. And he wrote to Hugo Templeman and said, "Can you come and visit me? I'd like to talk to you." And Hugo said, "I'm far too busy over here in Africa working with all these people, saving lives. You want to see me, you come to me."
Wow.
And he did.
It's a powerful man.
So there was a lot of that going on. We worked with charities. There was a charity called Starfish.
Right.
And all these sort of organisations were working with young children or orphans or supporting kids who were orphaned by AIDS, feeding them. The wonderful women that just come out off the streets almost. They start by seeing a hungry child walk into school and say, "Come in and I'll give you some soup." And the next day she brings her friend. And before you know it, there are 100 kids calling in every day.
Yeah.
And it's usually broth made from bones or something.
Right.
But they're using it as a social centre as well. So amazing some of the stuff that goes on over there.
And so, where did you go from Virgin? What was is that the biggest thing you did with Virgin? Tell me about Richard, because you've met Richard.
I've met him. Yeah, I've met him a few times. Well, of course, because one of my roles was any visitors who come, I show them around.
Oh, so you show him around. Hey, Rich, what's up?
But, I tell you something. That man runs.
Does he?
And he's very shrewd, because he knows how the setup of all his calls, and he knows all the things that people do. But when he walked around a building, he would just literally stop wherever he wants to stop and chat. And then he would find out all about what that person was doing, not just about the job, but about them. He'd sit down on a chair where people were in the call centre and put the headphones on and say, "Hello, can I help you? This is Richard." "Yes, Richard Branson." "Oh, yes, I am." And all this sort of thing. And so really hands-on.
Yeah.
And he would, as you walk past meeting rooms, he would open a door and poke his head in, say, "What's this meeting about?" And they'd say, "Oh, we're discussing, I don't know, could be 3D TV or something." Yeah. "Oh, no, I know all about that, and I'll tell you this, that, and the other. And have you thought about this?" He knew everything that was going on, but a great, fun guy.
Right.
Always up for a bit of fun.
I get that hint from him because of the things he'd invested in the early days, like the Sex Pistols. He signed the Sex Pistols to his record label.
Yeah.
And he definitely was a bit more of a hippie, I guess, or a bit more alternative in the business world when he started.
He was very shrewd. He was very shrewd. I mean, remember, because I've read some of his books, and I know he talked about when he was a very young boy in being out with his parents, and they turfed him out of the car, and it was about 11 miles from home or something, and said, "Right, make your way home, son." So he was made to think on his feet from a very early age.
Right.
And I think that's so instilled in him to be an independent thinker. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Incredible. Do you think he operates on a neurological level that most people can only dream to experience in fleeting moments throughout their life?
Well, I don't know. He's an extraordinary guy. He's very intuitive.
Yeah.
But he relies quite heavily, I think, on the people around him as well. He's very good at supporting himself with good people. And one of the ways that he takes somebody on as a right-hand man is to invite them to his home for a weekend. And if they get on, that's fine, I can trust you. And he encourages the CEOs of all his companies to do the same thing.
Right, hangability.
Yeah. Because it's all about people. It's all about, can I trust you? And if I can, you deserve your second chances if you go wrong or whatever. But it's all about the working relationship that's crucial, really.
Right.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. And what did you feel? What were your feelings with the bailouts during the COVID early on in the COVID pandemic? He was asking for quite a lot of bailouts, wasn't he, with the airlines and things like that? And he didn't earn himself very good press or favour, did he?
No.
Is this part of a much longer game, do you think, that in the end of it, he's actually going to come out with the goods and he'll turn it around and public opinion will sway back in his favour? Because he was always a popular billionaire, wasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely, because he's always been a man for the people. He was a consumer man.
Yeah.
But you've got to remember, at the bottom line is that he's a businessman.
Yeah.
It's all about keeping his businesses afloat.
Yeah.
And he'll do the best he can for everybody until the business is threatened, when he can't service anyone, and then he has to make a move.
Right.
It's a tough position to be in, but of course I don't think the airlines gained any favour from anybody, did they, through the COVID thing? It was the one area we were saying, for heaven's sake, fat cats, you make a load of money. It's about time you sat back and supported other people. So.
I did just see a headline today. I can't remember what it said exactly, but apparently Richard Branson has unveiled a scheme which is going to create multiple millionaires in entrepreneurship.
Yeah, that doesn't
so
surprise me.
He might be on his way back to
Yeah,
earning some
maybe.
good graces.
Well, certainly in South Africa, as I was saying to you earlier, he ran a school of entrepreneurship for young people to create their own businesses. So he's very much in favour of getting people to think that way, to be creative, stand on their own feet, do something that's radical and different, and be successful. So he's very good at that.
Yeah, it's a tough one for me, because I remember watching his show when I was a kid, when it was almost like, I don't know if it predated The Apprentice or whether it was some sort of a competition to The Apprentice, where he would take these people up
in the balloon,
on a hot air balloon for afternoon tea or something.
Right, absolutely.
And this was how he was going to pick his CEOs or his inner circle, something like that. And I always thought that was very cool, very fun. You didn't apply for that show.
No,
sounds like something you would have done.
But he's a fun. I mean, the parties. He threw some great parties. My God, some of the parties we've had down here. I mean, great big headlines in the local paper: sex, drugs, and rock and roll at Virgin. But we used to take over Club Ice. You remember, in Westbury, places.
I never went to Club Ice, but I know the legend.
Yeah,
Club
big
Ice.
nightclubs and things like. We'd take over the space, and there would be the entry into all these places. Would be, you'd have to show your pass on your lanyard.
Yeah.
Show your pass, tip your head back, and you'd be given a glug of vodka from the bottle. And that was your entry. So there were fun times, and you'd walk into these huge ice sculptures.
Yeah.
With vodka running down them, the men drinking from the booths and the women from other parts of the body. So, and it was rock and roll music. We used to have a lot of names. It was always Boy George doing the disco, and we'd have I don't know, who do we have there? I can't remember. The Saturdays or the Sugar Babes or something.
Right.
Some of these names that he'd pull in
from his label.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I'm just wondering when we're going to get to the ACDC club.
Oh my God!
How far away from the
that.
ACDC club are we?
Oh wow! Well, that was when I was very first married to John, my second marriage. Yeah, that was back in '83. I think we started.
So tell me about the ACDC club. It's not a fan club for ACDC.
No, ACDC stands for Anita Collier's Drinking Club. And it was only a bit of nonsense. And it came about because, as I was telling you, I had this job where we used to take coach loads to Europe, etc. Yeah. And I was at a coffee morning with friends. I had my 2 young kids. The youngest was only 1. And I was at a coffee morning with 5 or 6 women. And I was saying, I miss my booze cruise. I used to go across at Christmas and pick up the booze on my trips. And 3 or 4 of them said, I've never done that. I'd love to do it. And I said, well, I'd be happy to organise it. If each one of you could go off and get 3 or 4 people, we'd probably raise a coach not for a second thinking they'd do it.
Right.
But they did. They came up. We raised 50 people.
Right.
And we went off for an overnighter. I think we left at some unearthly hour, like 4 a.m.
Yeah.
And we did Portsmouth, Cherbourg overnight and then came back. And I remember one poor girl, I put out all this information to people about what to do, where to go, how to do it. And this poor girl totally forgot to get her passport. So she had to stay on the ferry and keep going backwards and forwards until we got back on. But we came back, and I remember the cost of it. It was, I think it was about 19 and 11 pence or so. Well, I mean, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
old money. It was very little money. I think it was about 19 quid. And it was part of the family allowance. So that's how we paid for it. And at the end of the trip, they all said, God, we've had such a fantastic time. Can we do it next year? And I said, look, it's been wonderful, but I don't for a second think you could get this to happen again. If you can, I'm happy to do it. But I wasn't expecting anything. And lo and behold, the following year, we had 100 women. And then that continued for 15 years.
Wow.
I took 100 women abroad to Europe for long weekends. And we did we've done Paris 2 or 3 times, done Amsterdam, been to the Rhineland for 3 days, Belgium, everywhere you can think of as a European capital, we've done. Yeah. I took them to, we went to Dublin, we've done Waterford, so a couple of trips to Ireland. I even chartered a couple of planes once to go to Jersey.
I love this.
Yeah, it was fun. Fun.
And what sort of... 100 women away from their husbands, significant others, probably many of them mothers let loose for a very rare...
Oh, yeah.
This sounds like it's you've got some stories.
But can you imagine the headlines in the paper? 100 women going off on an ACDC trip because nobody mentioned the fact that what it stood for. So we once or twice. I have had husbands who got very angry with me and came back and said, my wife is not coming on this trip. It's absolutely outrageous.
You're a bad influence.
A couple got funny. But we've had some unbelievable times, really, some extraordinary times on those trips. Yeah. I do remember in Bruges, I don't know where we'd probably been to Amsterdam or Brussels, I expect, but we used to call back into Bruges on the way home to ferry back from Zeebrugge. And on this particular occasion, I was couriering both coaches. So I was on the coach, first of all, saying, you can go here. This is where the chocolate shop is. This is where you'll find lace. This is the Church of the Holy Blood. I was sending everybody everywhere. And I said, meet back here at the coach at 4:00. Yeah. I said, so off you go. And I'm just going to tell the next coach the same thing. So I got on the coach and said, you find the chocolates and the lace and the Holy Blood. So back here at 4:00. But I'd said to both of them, if you want to, I'm going anyway. If you want to follow me, that's fine. And I had 100 women snaking after me all the way through Bruges because they were all a bit fearful to go off on their own. I mean, a lot of these women, remember, had never left the country. Right. A lot of them hadn't left Frome. So it was a big adventure for a lot of people. Far too nervous to go shopping on their own. But eventually, after the 10, 15 years, of course, they were all shooting all over the place. Everyone had so much confidence to do it. It's wonderful.
So you facilitated quite a bit more then, really, haven't you, than just taking some people. You've opened up a world for many people, haven't you?
I think in the early days it did that. Yeah,
that's
I think
amazing.
It did. Facilitator of fun.
Facilitator of fun, yes. I think I'm sort of laughing then because you said that they were sort of nervous in Bruges, and of the places I've been lucky enough to have business to visit. I was in Bruges last year with an ex-girlfriend, and it's the safest place in the world, really, isn't it?
Oh, it's wonderful.
And it just sort of seems a little bit silly to me that someone would be like scared because it's almost like a little toy town, isn't it? There's no threat there at all.
Exactly that. But then if you've never been abroad, it's,
right? I can understand that. But it's
especially watching people eating chips with mayonnaise. What are they doing?
I remember we did. It was quite hot when I went to in Bruges last year, and all we were doing was drinking Duval.
Oh my gosh!
Leffe, and I was trying to be quite good and have a some water periodically, not go too hard, not sort of, ruin the thing. And my girlfriend at the time, there's too much sun, not enough water,
All right.
too much booze. She ended up getting this like crazy migraine thing in the night, and we were staying by this. There's a river near there's a river. Isn't there? We were staying in a like a 3-story house thing, but we were in a Airbnb, so they had a 2-story thing. It was like a lofty sort of thing, and we couldn't really have the windows open because it was next to this river, and there's these mosquitoes coming in. I remember I had like bites on my thumbs and stuff. We had this fan on, and anyway, it was just uncomfortably hot and humid, and she had this headache, and we didn't have any paracetamol or anything. It wasn't going away. It got to the point where I was getting quite sort of worried about her, really, because she was sort of like writhing in pain. Like, no amount of water was really helping. And it got to about 3 a.m. I thought, right, I'm going to have to go out and find some medication.
Right.
And so I looked on my phone, I looked at the maps thing, and I saw that there was like a Shell garage, and it said open.
Okay.
I was like, great, this is where I'm going to get the paracetamol, and I might get some sleep tonight. And
being the selfless soul that you are.
Yeah, absolutely selfless. And so I headed out in Bruges at about 3 a.m. to this thing, and there was not a soul about. It was the quietest place. No one about. The street was completely empty. There was a student party happening, which I sort of wanted to shout up to the window because they were sort of hanging out having a fag. I sort of wanted to join them, but I had a mission. And that was about as noisy as it got. When I got to this Shell, it was very eerie because there's just nothing going on. No cars, hardly. And I got to the Shell garage, and it was open, but the pumps were open. So Google told me so there was no shop open. And I was like, oh my God. And there was these fellas up on a balcony, two chaps having some music on and smoking, having a drink. And I thought, well, perhaps their English is quite good, because in Europe, most people's English is fairly good. And I was trying to explain to them, my girlfriend's got this headache, really bad. I can't find any paracetamol or medication. I was thinking, hopefully, they'd go, oh, paracetamol cheap. Like here, it's like 50p a pack or something, isn't it? It's much cheaper than you think. And I thought, oh, maybe they just chuck me a pack and like, thank you. And they just didn't understand what I was saying. And they were like, we don't know what you're saying. Maybe call her an ambulance. And I was like, thanks very much, boys. Have a lovely evening. So go bye. I hope she's fine. And I sort of left, and I had to come back to this Airbnb empty-handed.
Oh my gosh.
And then I realised in the morning that you can only get this stuff from a pharmacy. You can't buy it in a shop.
You can't buy it in a shop. Oh, gosh.
So I went to the pharmacy, €19 for a pack of
what?
Paracetamol. Yeah, because they only did them in this big box.
Oh, right. Okay.
Absolutely
100.
There you go. There's my wild rock and roll Bruges story for you. Call her an ambulance. See you, boys. Whatever.
I love that.
The only souls.
Oh,
they had no idea what was going on.
They didn't know. Actually, there is nothing scarier than not being able to communicate with people, is there?
Yeah.
I had the one time that happened to me. It was not very long ago, actually. 4 years, I suppose, something like that. Because I used to go off every October, November time and take these 3-day city breaks.
Yeah.
Love it. Done quite a few, and I thought, I'm going to go to St. Petersburg. Never been to Russia, I'm going to go.
Right.
So I booked myself set up for 3 days. And, of course, you can't take any Russian money into the country.
Right.
So I thought, if I pre-book everything, I'm fine. So the first night I pre-booked this sort of Slavic dancing and merriment and what have you, and a couple of other things I was going to do there. And I arrived at my hotel. It was up 4 flights of the dingiest place I've ever stayed, I think. Everything was brown.
Yeah.
But I arrived at about 6 o'clock in the evening, knowing I was going to be picked up, about 5 o'clock in the evening, knowing I was going to be picked up at 6 by the coach. So I quickly shoved my stuff up to the room and came back down. The coach didn't come.
Right.
So I said after about 7:15, I said to the guy, what do I do? And she had broken English, but she understood. She said, I'll ring the company. So she rang the company and discovered the coach had forgotten to come pick me up, but it was way out of town by now and gone off to this venue to drop people off. It was about half an hour away, I think, something like that. And I said, so what do I do? She said, well, would you like me to call you a taxi? And I said, that's fine, but I have no money on me until tomorrow. I've got no rubles because I can't get to the bank until the morning. Don't worry. She said, we'll pay for the taxi. And I said, oh, that's lovely. Thank you so much. But how do I get home? No, don't worry. We'll send him back for you to bring you home at 9:30.
Right.
So I thought, oh, this is wonderful hospitality. I'm sorted. So off I went to my thing, and I came out at 9:15. No taxi. Oh. I was in the middle of St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
Traffic everywhere. Huge streets. I was right on the corner of this street. And I thought, oh, I'll wait. I'll just wait. He's probably a bit late. No, he didn't come. And eventually I started to panic. It was about 10 o'clock, 10:15. No sign of a taxi. Traffic hurtling by. No cabs. You can't hail a cab over there. Right. I ended up stopping people saying, excuse me, do you speak English? And they just stared a bit blankly at me. No. And eventually I found a young girl who said, I tried to explain to her, she had broken English, tried to explain what the score was. She was very good and rang the hotel for me, but couldn't make any sense of it. So gave me the phone with a very despairing look on her face. I'm sorry. Yeah. So I said, okay, don't worry. And I just wasn't sure what to do because I thought, well, where do I go from here now? I don't know where I am in Russia. I'm half an hour away from my hotel. I couldn't even remember the name of my hotel, to be honest. I had no money, no way of getting home, no way of contacting anybody. And my phone was starting to run out of battery. Right. So eventually I collared it. It was about 11:15 by then. I thought, I'm going to get arrested if I'm not careful. 11:15, I met a young lad coming up from the subway. And I said, do you speak English? Yes, a little bit. So I told him the story and he rang the hotel. And he said, no, nobody knows anything about this arrangement at the hotel. And I said, well, the lady that speaks English. And when he asked, she'd left about 2 hours earlier, gone off shift. So she hadn't passed on the message. Nobody knew anything about it. Stuck. And I said, well, what do I do? Because I've got no money. He said, don't worry, I've got a friend who runs a taxi company and I'll pay for your taxi. Right. So he called him and I went. That was it goes back to my thing about saying if you have trust in people, they'll come good. Yeah. You know, because I was there in the middle of a wild country, not knowing where I was, who I was. Yeah. But I got home, and it always works.
It's amazing. It's a good mantra, isn't it? If you give people if you show them confidence, you have confidence in them and their integrity. Yeah. They're not going to want to ruin that.
Absolutely.
Because everyone feels terrible if you let someone down. Yeah. Most people do. Yeah. So trust begets trust.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
That's beautiful. I guess, as we've been nattering for a while now, we should start talking about how you've managed to find yourself as the Mayor of Frome after this great saga. So we've got the Independence for Frome scene here in our town, which is where the party politics were sort of given the boot. How long ago now? It's sort of better part of
12 years. Yeah. 12. 10 years now to be, won't it?
Yeah. And so now there's an independent town council. There's no party politics. And we are both independent town councillors. And as I said,
loving it.
Yes, it's great. As I said at the beginning of the podcast, I'm your deputy mayor. You are the mayor of the town. What was this is, having heard a lot of your story, I'm sure this is only a fraction of your life that I've been treated to, but this feels very you. Actually, I kind of just understand this now that this was just the next logical thing for you to do. So tell me about the genesis of your journey into local politics, because I know you're with Fair Housing for Frome, which I guess we need to talk about as well. Yeah. How does this begin?
Well, I think really all the time the children were growing up, I was very involved in the community in one way or another. I mean, I was a governor at the college. I was worked on the PTA, chair of the PTA for a couple of years. I was on the Scout committee, the Keep Fit committee, you name it. I wanted to be involved in all these community things. I worked as a chair of trustees for Positive Action on Cancer for 12 years. So always had a finger in lots of pies in the town. always fascinated by what went on in the town, and I've always loved what the town has to offer. In fact, often when I was visiting people away, they'd say to me, "Oh God, are you paid by the council or something to talk about Frome?" Because I was so enamoured by what there is here, and I used to get very frustrated by people that said, "Oh, Frome, nothing to do." And I remember shrieking, saying, "Look, you've just got to look behind the streets, look behind the houses, just look a little bit deeper. Every club you want, every group you want to join, every arts venue, there's music, everything's here."
Yeah.
And I couldn't get people to see it. I was so frustrated by that. And I suppose because I've had that background there was an opportunity that arose a couple of years ago when a friend of mine, Rosie Elliott, who was actually married to one of our previous mayors.
Yes. Shout out Rosie and Toby Elliott.
Yeah. And Rosie runs a thing called Engaging Women.
Yes, I've heard of this.
Which is very much about trying to encourage more women to have a voice in local politics and, well, anywhere, basically. And she said, "Come along. Why don't you come along?" So I was quite intrigued by it. When I went along, there were 2 lady councillors there who were chatting about their life and what they did. And that was, it was Sheila Gore and Pippa Goldfinger who were talking. And I remember coming away thinking, wow, those women are quite amazing. You know, the job they do, I could feel the passion they had for the work they did. And Rosie said to me afterwards, "What did you think?" I said, "Well, I'm absolutely blown away and I'm quite intrigued and I think I might look into it." She said, "Good, because people are looking for candidates for the election, so get in there, girl." So I did. I put my name up and like you, we went along to all the interviews and things like that to get selected. And then we had to do the big campaigning to go. But yeah, it's been like a constant roller coaster of what's next, you know.
Yeah.
Because there's so much to do. And I think when you get underneath what's going on in the council, you start to realise how much goes on in this town.
Yeah.
How much people do and how much people have a passion to make it a good place to live, you know. And that sweeps you away. You can get so easily carried away on it. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So I can go a bit over the top about it really sometimes.
No, it's good. It's passionate. Did you feel the inner compass there with that when you walked away from that?
I just knew there was something coming.
Yeah.
But it may be because I'd retired from Virgin.
Right.
8 years previously. I'd travelled, as I said, 10, 12 holidays a year, you know, for 8 years. I think I was getting to the stage where I thought, I need something different now. I need a challenge back in my life.
Yeah.
Because holidaying is fun. It's great.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say
What
it's boring at all.
But holidaying from it that
But
point?
I wasn't getting any. I wasn't getting the stimulus. I wasn't being stretched.
Yes.
Which is what I love. I love to be stretched and to learn. And of course, feeling that this was coming up, this just suddenly started. All the little pieces started to fall into place.
Yeah.
And,
and you knew it was right.
Sense. Yeah.
And
but you know what Rosie's words were?
Yeah.
When I left that meeting, she said, "Great, go for it. You need to stand for election. And if you get in, go for mayor. You'll love it." Those were Rosie's words. Yeah.
I remember when we were at the Corner House celebrating our election win. Rosie was there, and I had my ex-girlfriend with me, well, my girlfriend at the time, and she said something to her like, "You'll never see him now. He's gone."
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because I remember asking in the early days, "What's the time commitment here? What am I expected to give in terms of time?" And
they downplay it.
Well, they do, because 2 or 3 people said to me, 3, 4 meetings a month.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, I was told something similar. They totally downplay it.
No way.
And I kind of knew instinctually. I was like, I think they're downplaying
this. Oh, dear. Yeah. I mean, I don't think many days. I mean, I know being a mayor might put extra pressure on, in a sense, in that you're expected to attend every meeting and those sorts of ththings. But even so, I mean, I think it's very rare a day goes by without 3 meetings.
Yeah.
Really. A day. And a lot of those are evening meetings, so it cuts into your social life.
Yeah.
But if you revel in it, I think the thing is that once you get your teeth into something and you realise that you can chip away, nothing happens overnight,
Yeah.
but it's chip, 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 and gradually you can make a difference. And it's very easy then to get carried along with the enthusiasm of it all, really.
And get rolled up into it. So you were deputy mayor to Mark Dorrington.
Yes.
How? What did you learn from Mark that you're now putting into place?
Mark had the most extraordinary energy. I mean, he wanted to be everywhere with everyone and never say no, and he did that. He was extraordinary in what he managed to achieve, really. But he's he has huge integrity, and he's a very honest man, and he's the sort of man that everybody can relate to. He knows a lot of people. He's genuinely loved around the town. And he's just solid, a really nice guy. And he was very good to me. He was like a mentor for me, and threw me a few chips now and then to things to go to and things to do. And he was away for a month while I wrote his column. And so I gradually cut my teeth on little things like that. But when I was deputy mayor, as you do, you're doing your own thing. I was finding my own way by introducing myself to various groups around the town, saying, I'm deputy, can I come and talk to you? Can I come and say hello? And gradually I got involved in all the sheds around the town and lots of different things. So you make it your own, don't you? Whatever position, like you are doing now, you make it your own. Yeah, doing a grand job, my lovely.
Thank you very much. And so where are we now? We are in December. We're in December. Christmas is around the corner.
Yep.
And how long left have you got until?
Well, it's early May, isn't it? So there's really another 4 or 5 months to go. So
it's a fair little bit, isn't it? If you're mayor for a year, it's a fair little stint left. What are you looking forward to most? Which isn't potentially handing the chains over to me and having a big long rest.
Well, there's so much stuff. I mean, you mentioned Fair Housing for Frome.
Yes.
I'm a director of Fair Housing for Frome as well as being a councillor. And we're really starting to make inroads into that now.
Right.
We've got a lot of new directors and starting to get involved in much bigger issues than we ever did before. So getting involved very closely with a housing needs survey that's coming up soon to find out, because one of the difficulties we've got around homelessness, I mean, we're quite well off in Frome in that we don't have that many people sleeping on the streets, thank God. But I think we've probably got a huge problem under the surface with the sofa surfers, and it's what they call the hidden homeless. And I think then, there's an awful lot of work that needs to be done for these people. Some people are really struggling. And we need to identify the problem. That's the first thing we need to do. But we're doing all we can at the moment in terms of being almost a signposting agency, if you like. So there's a Facebook page. We send out newsletters and blogs. We have our own website. So really talking to people about all the different people they can pull in to help them if they're in a situation regarding potential homelessness or anything to do with renting or landlords or whatever. So we get involved in lots of those different groups. And we've also started this year taking a table out into the precincts and talking to people, gathering information. And we're going to be doing more of that.
Boots on the ground work.
Absolutely. And, we're even going to be taking up a place on Frome FM, doing a bit of radio work.
Awesome.
So there's a lot. We're expanding at quite a rate now, and I think it's getting bigger and bigger. So it's good. So there's that to do. And I'm also very keen to keep supporting the businesses. I mean, I think that's crucial. So many of these guys are struggling beyond belief. The resourcefulness they've shown, I think, is quite incredible, really, with some of the different things they've done with mail order businesses or setting up diverse things to sell, all sorts of things. But then, they need help. They just need to know that somebody's out there, somebody cares, I suppose. And they need sometimes guidelines about where they can go for help. And of course, I love the neighbourhood thing. I've become quite involved in setting up all these neighbourhood groups around the town. And in fact, just put a sharing box on my own little bit of space, not far from me. a community sharing box that people can share bits and pieces with each other.
So what do you put in the sharing boxes? Books?
Anything,
And
children's toys. I mean, I put gloves in there, packets of crisps, a bag of rice, some Coca-Cola.
Some walkers.
Children's games. I put a couple of recorders in there that were my kids when they were little. I mean, anything.
Well, I hope you wipe the mouthpieces. We're in a pandemic.
Anything goes. So, yeah, whatever you like.
Brilliant. And you're enjoying it? You're reveling in it?
Absolutely love it, Andy.
And the chains they're not, what's that saying? Heavy is the head that wears the crown. It's the opposite, is it, with the chains of you?
Yeah. The thing I suppose really there has to be a little bit of ego in here, doesn't there, really? But I love nothing more than putting on that chain and walking through the town.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it. And it gives me such a high when people just put their hand up or come up and say, "Oh, are you the mayor?
Yeah.
Can we talk about this? Can we talk about that?" And I revel in that. And in a way, it's being I like to feel I'm a conduit for people to make their views heard or something I can take back. And lovely that people feel able to come up and do that.
Yeah.
So
it's amazing how much reverence there still is in this modern, busy age where everyone is their own star online.
Yeah.
For a title like the mayor. It's been quite crazy the amount of sort of respect or reverence that you become you receive. Sorry, when you've got these titles, it really was. Yeah. It never ceases to sort of take me back. It's quite humbling.
Well, you feel it now as deputy mayor. I know you do because you've done some phenomenal work out there, and I know people hold you in huge respect for the things you do. But you wait. It just gets bigger and better. Okay. Yeah.
So I guess maybe we should wrap this up with a question, which could be, what advice? Let's say, so I'm not guaranteed to be the mayor next year. So that would be.
It's not a guarantee.
It's not a guarantee.
But
I've got a shoe in, maybe.
Yeah.
I wouldn't like to proclaim I'm going to be, just on the off chance that I won't be. But it's looking likely.
Mm-hmm.
What would be your advice to me? What would you tell me now on this podcast that you might take me aside and say, in the corridors of power in May?
I think the only thing I would say to you is what I would say to you, whether you were going for mayor or anything else in life.
Yeah.
Just be you.
Yeah.
If you can stay authentic, if you can just be you, you'll fly. You'll fly.
Well, thank you. Thanks for being such a good mentor as well so far.
Oh.
It's really
mutual.
Been,
it's mutual, Andy.
Thank you. It's really been so amazing since joining the council. It's just like the 17 other councillors, and when we have meetings and stuff, it's like, I never feel like the smartest person in the room, or I'm always inspired. It's just the greatest.
And me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just the greatest thing to be surrounded by so many brilliant people, so many brilliant minds.
But
and
we are living and learning every day, aren't we?
Yeah.
We're learning from each other. That's the beauty of this, is that I think, I suppose there's an old saying, isn't there? If you try and teach an elephant how to fish, he's going to think all his life that he's stupid. Because when you go into something like this and you know nothing,
yeah,
you're floundering, aren't you? You just got no idea. But gradually you have to take on bits and pieces, listening to all these guys that really have a clue about what they're doing.
Yeah.
But so lovely to be part of it and to learn from all these people. I love it.
Thank you so much to Mayor Collier for being our guest this week on the Giant Pod. I had such a great time hanging out. Actually, after we did that podcast, we spent about 4 hours drinking and listening to opera. If you want to check out some of Anita's mayor's columns and other mayor-related things, you can check them out in the show note descriptions. Please like, subscribe, leave a review. It really does help. If you want to help this podcast grow, if you want to help us tell these stories, please just tell a friend, share the link online somewhere. If you want to follow my antics on Instagram, it's Andy_S1S, and you can follow The Giant Pod on Instagram and Twitter at The Giant Pod. This was produced by the Honourable Harry Williams. Thank you so much for listening. I really loved this one, and I will see you next week for another belting Giant Pod. Thanks so much.